Okay, so here we go.
Wow, awesome. Hey, y'all, we're back. A year after a really incredible panel about localization and the trials, tribulations of that. I can't believe the company let me come back and talk to y'all about porting of all things. Uh, porting, am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Porting has been with the industry since its very start. It isn't always the most exciting thing that happens, and it is typically more about accessibility than providing new content, but drives thousands of hours of comparison footage and speculation on videos and forums and technical articles breaking down all aspects of performance.
Yeah.
Um, it's how we fight our console wars. It's something we ban people from talking about too fervently online. With the consolidation of
Oh,
platform
the
hardware,
Twitter
we've
drama.
seen it become more and more popular, seemingly, and
At
seemingly
least I'm
easier
not that triggered
than
by
ever.
the Twitter
And yet,
drama.
we still see some of the core issues crop up time and time again. But I didn't really come across a lot of materials about some of the basic elements of porting, especially from the perspective of publishers while looking online. Something that over the last few years we've really revamped the pipeline of at NISA. And now we can share a bit of that insight and journey with you. Woo! So, here's quick introductions for us to the panel, just the two of us. So hopefully you'll learn a thing about the process of porting a title from a different angle, and we're gonna make some really cool announcements along the way. Okay? Okay.
Yeah, I hope it's a PC port.
So I'm Travis. I work for the marketing team at NISA. That's me from last year. Uh, basic big points on my job. I decide basically what we talk about when we talk about certain parts of a game. I talk to the press and to you, the fans, and I give talks like this one, which is neat.
And I'm Alan Costa, featuring my cat Kona, and apparently Sadako from The Ring over there on the left panel, haunting this panel. I'm on the producers team. I originally got my start in localization, actually, and I do a lot of kind of behind-the-scenes stuff for when we choose to port a game, and do the scheduling, the budgeting, and things like that, as well as when we have guests from Japan come out, I very often take care of them and do interviews and things like that.
Yeah.
So
I
the
wish I was
concept
that
here is that
fluent.
we are going to be talking about the business and publishing relationships regarding ports. Neither of us are qualified to talk about the technical aspects, but I don't believe this is something that has previously been divulged by anyone in a panel before. So correct me
Well,
again,
I think Modern
developer.
Vintage Gaming did something
And
about
one
copy
small disclaimer,
protection.
in
But
addition,
again,
a lot
that
of this is
was
like really
unrelated.
heady, almost academic stuff. So kind of bear with us here. Hopefully, it'll be really informative to you, but it's not like, oh, no scope.
Yeah,
Is it?
we're
I'm
gonna be
actually
learning with
going
you.
to start college next
So
week.
quick basics. What are we gonna cover today? What is a port? Almost as important, just as important. What is not a port? What is required to make a port? Why make a port? What kind of points are we gonna get soon? Brief history of our NISA ports. How do we make our ports better? Basically, how we've improved over the last really 4 years since 2016. And is localizing something that is kind of a port? Some cool tricks that we're going to pull off of the recent titles, and we're always looking forward to. And secret. So shouldn't be surprising anybody, but we advertised this thing by saying we were going to give you some new announcements, and we're definitely going to deliver on that.
Please look forward to it.
Please
That
make it
being
a
said,
PC port.
okay.
Okay, dude.
So porting, it's just a giant button, right? You just press the button, click port game.
No.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all so
Right on,
much
awesome.
for coming to the panel.
Ugh. Oh my
I feel like even
goodness.
though AGDQ was last week, I'm still trying to speedrun everything and anything I can. Thank you. That was my hosting a PAX panel and 8% win.
For real?
All right,
No.
but for real. So this is the clinical definition of a port. Whoa. Don't like it. Super broad. Could really mean a whole lot of things. But generally, what we are talking about here is end user experience. I think for our purposes, a port is when you're able to transfer the user experience from one system to another, and not just the software.
And now would be a good time to say, if you are not familiar with us as a company, we're a publisher, primarily of titles from Japanese studios, of course our own head office, Nipponichi Software, as well as other places. So what this means is that we are usually publishing titles that are in development or previously released, usually already in Japan. For our usage, we tend to call things a port when we are talking about a version of the game that is being developed that was not part of the title's original release. So some examples would be the Switch version of Labyrinth of Refrain Coven of Dusk, which was based on the PlayStation 4 version of the game, which was based on the Vita version of the game, or the PC version of Ys VIII, Lacrimosa of Dana, which was originally
Yeah,
developed for the PS4
but
and the PS Vita for that.
let's not talk about that
Then
part.
to us, port is a version of the game that is undergoing additional development, while at the same time or slightly after we are completing the localization of a previously released title in Japan. Easy.
No,
I think it's just as important to
because
discuss kind of what
back in 2006 when Apple
it's
switched
really
from
confusing to try and narrow down
PAL
what port
PC to
is,
Intel,
what want to go for,
they
what it isn't.
they had to port a lot of
And this
software
discussion about
into
it.
universal
So
binaries,
just adding an expansion pack is not a port.
and then they
Sometimes
make
a port may be introduced with additional content, but an expansion pack by itself, not a port.
Totally remaking the
yeah.
title or creating a new sequential title, something else entirely. Maybe not if the remake is using the same character script or combat systems or some combination of them. When I think about this, I'm thinking of like Final Fantasy XIV to A Realm Reborn or Final Fantasy VII to Final Fantasy Remake, not really a port.
Having two wildly different versions is a pretty gray area. It sort of
Yeah.
reminds one of the thought experiment of the ship of Theseus, which, in short, if something has all of its parts replaced, at what part can you actually call it the original, or is it still the same entirely?
I'm also reminded of some of the vast differences of older titles. I mean, I might be reaching here, based on how the average gamer is these days, but older ports like Mortal Kombat for the Genesis and SNES versus the Game Boy Edition, you're talking about a small roster, rebalance mechanics, and controls.
Yeah.
Does it retain enough of the original gameplay experience to the end
No,
user
but given
to
the
be
technical limitations
And
back
that's how
then,
old we are, but
that
people
would have
also
been
talk about the
understandable.
jumping mechanics in Crash Bandicoot's Insane Trilogy. So they had different physics from the original, but since the stages themselves are identical to the original and the story is unchanged, is it not recreating the essence of the originally intended player experience?
And in thinking about a remaster versus a re-release, which is closer to being the ideal of a port. All right, I'm gonna go on a little bit of a limb here, but bear with me. Basically, when we get a title, it's already been released. It has a title code in the first-party database. There's a lot of other details to it. But the version that we then create is typically treated, for all intents and purposes, as a completely separate title. People who have played
Yeah.
through the Japanese versions of our games and then played.
I actually bought Trails of Cold Steel 3 for $50 in South Korea, compared to the $60 I paid for the US version and the $70 that you would buy in Japan.
Puts it in a different category. Again, different SKUs.
Because
how
I went
retailers,
to
how businesses treat the titles is different.
a district
And
called
sometimes it
Yongsan,
appears with expanding
and
content, but maintains the
when I
same
went
player
to
experience.
Yongsan,
The case against, we're not really
there
talking
were
about
like
different
a
systems.
PlayStation,
So
a
something
store
like Final Fantasy
selling
PS4 gets released on
PlayStation
PS4
games.
for a different reason. Just sort of a neat thought experiment. But we're gonna get messier before it gets clearer. What is, how do we clean up the mechanic? How is cleaning up the mechanics disqualifying of a port? I think it depends on when you define the spirit of the title.
Right, like for Utawaru Mono, we're talking about what is essentially an HD remake of the original. The story hasn't been changed from the PS2 version, but it does feature new artwork and models. Development team, which is at this point kind of a mix of newcomers as well as people who originally worked on the original game, have added a lot of tweaks which are more in line with what gamers today would expect. We are translating to English for the first time officially, and this game also revamps the battle system, making it more in line with Mask of Deception and Mask of Truth. However, it is originally based on the title's original PC and PS2 roots, obviously not the eroge version of the game.
Or, let's take Langrisser, which originally received a translation to English on the Sega Genesis as Warsong. No offense to the original translation or the translators, but it is widely panned for having a bad case of being localized in the 90s. The developer implemented both updated
Well,
art and the original concept art.
if you're talking about the
the
subtitles I'm working
inspiration
for
this
my,
title. There's also a long history of this title being ported,
so for my
including SNES, PlayStation,
Sakura
Saturn,
Wars
PS2, and
Legacy
Windows 98,
Part 1
which were all
gameplay,
bundled together and
I
featured
had to use
various tracks
localization,
from
not
some of the voiceovers who
translation.
didn't. It seems like one of the
Because
more interesting things about the
I think with
progression of continual console generations, by some people's count, we're either in the 8th or 9th, and the desire of developers to share their vision, regardless of hardware limitation, and the players' desire to continue to enjoy these games on newer hardware is only going to create more interesting combinations and results as we go along. And our definition of what can conceivably be called a port, or a remake, or a remaster, or whatever next title we give these games will continue into the foreseeable future. And that's actually pretty fascinating to me.
In other words, it's
alright, so here's
really
the supports that they're working on.
Moving away from the philosophical aspect of what is a port,
So we
let's
have
go back to the
the
practical.
Switch port, Trails of Cold Steel 3,
As publishers
which
of
I'm
video
definitely
games,
gonna pick up
why would we
on
choose
day
to
one,
publish a game? That's
given
not
that it doesn't interfere with my
simple.
schedule for
Well, we
going
want to
to
expand the potential audience of our
Asia.
title, which is
I'm going in May
Asia.
this year,
How
so
does one decide to do a port? And that's a little bit more complicated. Obviously, we're going to do a cost-benefit analysis at the start of the project. We evaluate the title as received from the original licensor, because publishing is a licensing agreement with the original holder of the IP. Or game.
yeah.
And we began the process of negotiating various aspects of the budget, including our internal budget. This includes decisions about the potential revenue that can be generated by additional versions of the game, as well as we balance this against obligations and policies of the partner that we're working with. Sometimes these can be financial, but also this has to do with things like time or technical, and sometimes it's even based on our previous or existing relationship with these partners that we have.
That sounds really complicated, but that's just sort of the prelude into going into these things a little bit more in detail later on.
Okay, so
As you can sort of see here, I just sort of took a random assortment of various titles that we're currently working on or recently released. Based on our portfolio, we're dealing with a pretty crazy range of titles.
yeah.
Genres, platforms, from our big tentpole releases to our cool indies, unusual cult classics, and our signature NIS releases that a lot of people are familiar with. It's kind of nuts, but these may release on the same day as a primary SKU, maybe slightly later, or it could be, just out of nowhere. I was thinking 13 years. So, let's say that the biggest obstacle to publishing a Japanese title, which is localizing the additional languages, already completed. Hooray!
No.
With that out of the way, you really have just like a small amount.
You need to know N1 kanji,
Just a little bit.
the highest level of
Start with
kanji,
design. So,
to get the agreement.
once we sign a title,
But then you have a
we get
design,
all of the
too.
art assets from the original developer. But that doesn't mean that these art assets are kind of ready to go and just slot into a lot of things. Our design team needs to make box design as well.
Yeah,
as
literally
some
when
assets for digital
Mac
releases and
developers had to
different
port their
platforms, things like that.
software from
We have to think
PowerPC
about
to
things we can do for on the store
Intel.
shelf, or if we're doing some kind of marketing exercise, like being at a convention like here at PAX South, we need to think about art for that. And this can require some adjusting for size, viewable area, characters, and logo placements.
Just different sizes and boxes. It's pretty obvious, but an Xbox box is not the same viewable space as a Switch box. This all goes into consideration.
And this
Yeah.
can get pretty crazy because sometimes the art assets that we receive, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with a program like Photoshop, but sometimes you will get art and everything is layered, which
The
means
reason I had to
also
reinstall
kind of
Windows
collage. We can
on
do
Wednesday was
every
because
individual
Photoshop wasn't
Sometimes
working.
these are not
I
layered.
uninstalled and
We just have
reinstalled
to work with that
Photoshop. I
or
tried
think
to
around that.
restart my computer,
Sometimes it's in
but
Japanese, the logo, so it needs to be translated and then redesigned.
yeah.
But all of these things, they take a lot of time and they take a lot of consideration because you want to represent this game as best as it can be. If you plan on releasing it in multiple languages again, you have to think about that and their rules. If you've
Yeah.
ever seen the box, for example, of a German game, they have a rating system called USK, and the USK logo is like
Substantially bigger than anybody else's.
yeah,
Yeah,
huge,
it's
and sometimes it
because
can really interfere with a great piece of art.
even though Germany
Space near the
has
corner
improved
because
since
it might be
World War
partially
II,
obscured by a bigger rating sticker.
And certain retailers or retail partners
their
require
freedom
assets to be created
of
for their
speech
own
is still
storefronts,
pretty
whereas
weak.
in the case of first party on a digital platform, they'll make what's called hero banners, so we'll have to create stuff like that. Or Steam, they have things that they want as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot goes into the design phase of a port.
And thankfully for Steam, it's a global platform, so you just got to do it once, but you got to do it in every language all at once. So,
Also, there is the region
speaking of rating
locking.
stickers, nearly every region has one or more rating boards that a title must pass submission to sell into retailer, like locally. If a title has never received a rating in that region, so we have had titles where it was only released in North America and maybe just parts of Europe, but then we're bringing it to, say, Italy, and now it needs to be rated for the first time or something. Well, not.
I think Peggy would be
necessarily,
universal
maybe
across
just
most of Europe.
if a title's never received a rating, and yeah, you have to submit footage of the title that you think that would change the rating from the ESRB requirement of everyone. Thankfully, in most cases, moving laterally across platforms, that means sort of the same generation. So if you go from PS4 to Xbox, you typically don't have to resubmit. You just resubmit the ones for PS4 and Xbox. But in the case of a port, this can change because you're talking about possibly vertical movement. A game goes from being on the PS3 to the PS4. That's considered a
Or
vertical
maybe
movement.
censorship,
Transferring a game from
because
the older system to the new
Sony
one,
is
or from
deciding
nothing in the
what
code
you
has
see in the
changed.
games.
Depend,
Isn't the ESRB already
so
enough?
trigger a requirement for additional submissions. And let's just say that you really want to get it right on the first go. You'll notice a pattern in the things that we're discussing is a matter of like timing. And it kind of all comes down to timing. And these are all subsequent reactions to that. So anything that delays design may have impacts in other places. Anything that delays the rating submission may have impacts in others. Places.
Yeah, a few frames of Una slapping
Any title
Kurt
that you want
was
on any given platform,
censored
you're at the
in the
behest
English
of the
version.
platform holder. And every
How you
platform holder
play
is
in
a little bit
with the
different and will
Japanese
want certain
voice
things handled.
track?
For example, a game's technical and graphical text is going to need to be corrected for different ways in which the
Yeah.
system handles those assets. Thankfully, a lot of these places are handed off to the system messaging system itself, like messages that will pop up telling you that the disk is going to be ejected, or sometimes it's also like.
It didn't used to be the case, but a lot of the first-party systems have taken on more of the messaging that's required, so we don't have to translate it and make sure that we're using the right graphic icon.
Exactly, but that also kind of comes with its own issues in that the prompts and things like that are all strictly laid out by the platform holder, and so even if you think like, oh, maybe I can use the word directional button, well, actually for Nintendo you have to use the word D-pad, and if you don't, then you have to kind of redo that submission all over again.
It could be like
Yeah.
a green triangle, right? As long as it's just
Actually, they had to change it to
no, it has to be a
D-pad
certain color of green
in
triangle
the
or
US because
Exactly, and so
the original term in
a lot of these
Japan
changes are very
was
subtle to the
crosspad.
and
And the
usually not
kanji they
onerous in
use
terms
for
of what's asked
crosspad
of you, but
is
it also
literally
is
the
by
same
nature to
as
make sure that you
a
are
holy
on board
cross.
with
So
what it is they want you to
Nintendo
do.
did take some
And each one of these
steps.
things again is a lot of time to make sure that that's been done correctly.
First parties are extremely strict on their own TRG requirements. Basically, failing any of the minor violations can set your game back entirely and require an additional submission. So, with everything implemented, from making sure the text fits, even there's a difference in screen resolution or potential aspect ratio, to making sure that the word PlayStation is not present in the final version of Nintendo Switch submission, everything's going to require someone to go back, play through the game, report new issues if they appear, and go back and regress to make sure previously fixed issues.
I'll give you some reports on the
And coming from a
Trails of Cold
localization
Steel 1
background
PC
myself, one of the
port.
big
If
things
you
that
set the
we face,
language to Japanese, you'll see
when you're localizing
PlayStation
a game
menus
is
instead of
sometimes the developers
PC
actually will have
menus.
a character, well, most of the time, like, there will be a character limit per text box, and if it overflows, then it looks bad. So you have to kind of
Yeah, when I use
the
high-res
length of the
in
sentence that you
Trails of
wanted to
Cold
write,
Steel
which,
on,
for a language like Japanese, which uses Chinese characters that contain tons and tons of meaning inside of them,
Yeah.
that would require several words in English to get through. So we have to be careful about that, as well as things like for voiced lines, sometimes voiced lines, there's mouth flaps that go along with it, and those mouth flaps have to be timed. And so if it's a very short word in Japanese, again, that contains a lot of meaning, we have to match it to the that voice line to make sure that our English falls within that, so it doesn't look like the character has stopped speaking, whereas the English audio keeps going and going and going.
And
Yeah.
naturally, anything that changes from this has to be coordinated, usually in multiple languages, usually between multiple studios. And yeah, multiple consoles quickly balloon the necessary hours to properly go through each system.
And there's always going to be
Oh.
issues, you can be sure of it. The best laid plans, of mice and men and all that. But what this gives us is an opportunity to improve our own processes, to make sure we're more efficient and we can get games passed at the very beginning. And sometimes this can actually work out in your favor because you can find yourself ahead of schedule. 9 times out of 10 you're behind schedule, but every now and again you're ahead of schedule if you play
Yeah.
your cards right. And the dev team reports that they have extra time to polish up an area, resolve problematic issues affecting performance, things like that. These can sometimes come up, but by and large, they're not givens, and so you have to weigh the potential gains against the potential losses.
Oh, and hey, my team. If a title has been out for a while and is just now getting a new port, we often aren't left with a lot of options in regards to the traditional tried and true methods of marketing, which is typically withholding and then tactically revealing information over the course of a title's pre-order period. Sorry, I've revealed all the secrets. Sometimes taking a different tact is helpful. Like say creating a panel at a major convention about porting games to their systems. Often this relies on getting to understand and target a platform's particular fan base and the channels that they seek out for information. It's sort of like New Game Plus, like when you beat the game and you start over and you're more powerful, but it's like
Yeah.
Dark Souls New Game Plus, where you don't get new loot to help you and everything is just harder.
And sometimes you're preaching to the choir in that, a lot of people for Japanese games will follow information on certain sites that will bring you the Japanese information. And so by the time it kind of rolls around to us, it's like, well, gosh, what new thing can we pull out here that hasn't already been revealed over the course of the Japanese marketing campaign?
So talk a lot about different aspects, but how do you port something exactly?
Yeah. It's not easy, I tell you.
Still not programmers. We're still not game devs.
But there's a more serious question here with a number of different outcomes that we've encountered when working with various companies in the past. For the most part, there's a fairly limited options given to a team. The golden option would be the team, the budget, the timing, all align, and we have one great team working on multiple versions of the game, and it's wonderful, and it's also incredibly rare.
Just like never, ever, ever.
Sometimes a company will decide that they don't want to share the source code. And so with another studio, and so we have to kind of navigate around that.
Reverse engineering.
Sometimes
Modern
there's
Modern
reasons
Vintage
the studio
Gamer
doesn't
did a
want
lot of
to,
videos
or they're not
about
able to do
it.
themselves.
I
For example,
suggest
if they don't
checking out
source
his
the
channel.
they're already working on the next game, for example. They need to move on to a different project. Or if the budget, for example, is just a little bit too much and they can't do it. Sometimes developers will be inexperienced with a target platform, which leads to problems with optimization. So porting is usually happening at literally the same time as the lead SKU's development, and so the team can't allocate headcount to be able to work on the port as well. All these things are kind of barriers to getting a port up and running.
So, with that being said, what are the other options? Well, you could wait for the plans to align, time to stand still, and for your lead programmer to find all 7 Dragon Balls. Or
Yeah, Dragon Ball Z
not that you're a
Kakarot came
senior in the
out today.
industry. I've seen a lot of people get wise to this in recent years, but spanning back decades, even if you were a fairly biggish team, compared
Okay,
to the average heads count
I
of
choose
studio,
PH3.
you didn't ordinarily port your own titles outside of a fairly few lead systems, and many famous studios get their start financing their initial projects basically through mercenary development work on contract before branching out. And a lot of these just sort of remain specialists in their field.
A lot of times during this project, we as the publisher, we still need to be very involved with various aspects of this third party working on the port, usually as an intermediary between the original development studio and then the studio working on the port because of the huge language barrier.
Yeah.
It's great that we have people who speak both in our company so that we're able to be a bridge between, but you can imagine that that's a pretty huge barrier to work with.
Just even up there, you see that we have.
Yeah, I work on the
studios,
subtitles
studios,
myself, so.
kind of studios all over the world. It's really nice that it can be spread out and operate for different sizes and different projects. We're not the same. When we're looking for a port of one of our titles, it's not the same as a super huge Gears of War title, some AAA that requires an equally big team to assist in porting it. We can go.
Nihon Falcom only has like
One thing
50
we
or
also
so
need to worry
employees,
about too
so
is that whenever you do any kind of taking the game from one language to another or one system to another, is that you need to debug it. You need to make sure that there are no more issues that are in the game. And so we help out with that in terms of QA and then bug regression as well. And bug regression is when you've identified a bug, and then you take it back to the devs, they work on it, they give it back to you, and you're checking to make sure that, yes, this bug has actually been squashed.
So, okay, bear with me because I am going to strangle the heck out of this analogy. Something we've been trying this generation that's really new to us is that due to various different factors, including the cost of developing titles and producing the materials for production, lots of competition at retail and our own, well, let's say, selfish desire to produce something really cool for people that we want to go an extra step for. We've created retail limited editions for some of our titles, and
yeah.
we're not the only ones. Limited run games, I am 8-bit, fan gamer. I think everybody in the industry is looking really carefully at each other for cool new ideas.
Absolutely, and I personally have bought games from all three of them. I just went to LRG earlier today and picked up 2 games. Yeah, we all love each other in the industry. Conversely, now that digital distribution exists, we can now offer varying prices across different systems too. So part of our pitch to developers can be, this is an endorsement of a product. It's kind of, there's a prestige that goes along with seeing your game on a store shelf, and we like to tell developers that. A lot of times, indie developers or even large developers will have this feeling that, well, there's a bit of self-doubt and like, well, can this really make it to retail? Can this really sit on a store shelf? And we're here to tell them.
Do you think the internet is at a good place in 2020?
Psycho is actually coming out next Tuesday, and it's technically a port collection that was ported to Switch, so from arcade to cell phones to Switch. I want to mark it out as our first portception title of the afternoon, which sort of brings us to our first announcement. Why not?
Yeah, and that was our best attempt at creating a smooth bridge to our Little Town Hero announcement. Little Town Hero, if you're not familiar, is of course an RPG that was released for Switch digitally that we are now super excited and pleased and humbled to be able to bring to you as part of a
Hold on.
big idea.
Game Freak licensed this?
By Game Freak, of course, and the soundtrack is by Toby Fox.
It will be coming to the Switch in spring 2020. Kind of imagine that there weren't a lot of people expecting that one, but we're just getting
I thought this was going to be licensed by
Before we talk about what
Nintendo,
it's like now, we should probably take a look at
given their
history
close
of
connection to Game Freak.
Specifically, we're going to be covering our own NIS, well, Nipponichi software titles. The earliest is 2006's Disgaea Afternoon of Darkness. This was a PSP port of the PS2 2003 Disgaea Hour of Darkness. Disgaea's heavy reliance on 2D sprites made putting it over to the PSP a pretty reasonable goal. And it came with the additional Etna scenario, ad hoc multiplayer, and it was very popular for the PSP at the time. This would later find its way to PC with nearly a decade later in 2016, when specifically the PSP version of the game, minus the system-limited ad hoc multiplayer, was added to the Steam version. And then 2 years later, the team would come back to revive the title with Disgaea 1 Complete, an HD remake of the game that retains the original storyline, additional content made available from the PSP, plus some new additions and quality of life changes. I'm not reading this at all off memory. But in each iteration, the game experience itself is mainly unchanged.
You can see this echoed in basically the first decade of the company's history. Release title on home consoles, allow the fan base to build up, create a new version on a newer portable system with expanding content and system-dependent features. We see this linear strategy in echoes of Disgaea 2, 3, 4, and others. And it was basically our go-to strategy for updated releases for a time.
But it wasn't always so predictable. Embedded in the roots of the company's earliest years were a willingness to actually approach games across multiple ecosystems, as long as there was a hope that there was a new audience out there that wanted to get their hands on a given game. Both Disgaea and another earlier NIS title, 1998's Rhapsody, a musical venture, which was the first game I ever bought from NIS, way back when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Were released on PlayStation platforms, and Rhapsody, for example, was later released on DS, which it was actually the same day as Disgaea as well.
Yeah.
So there. And then after varying degrees of alternate, obviously we had to do a lot of work to make it, look good on 2 different screens instead of just one.
Phantom Brave was the first PS2 to PSP to Wii port that we handled, but eventually found its way onto Steam again much later. We've definitely evolved our process and been fortunate enough to be involved in a bunch of really classy port situations, I think. I think if you think of something like what can be considered like the ultimate port collection, then SNK 40th Anniversary seems to be like a perfect fit. In 2018, it was pretty clear that Vita was on the decline, so we shifted almost all of our titles at that time in Vita to also include Switch, and that became a porting powerhouse for us. Penny Punching Princess, Longest 5 Minutes, The Lost Child, Labyrinth of Refrain, Covenant Dusk, and just like a bunch of others, all within 1 year.
Yep, and pour one out for the Vita there. We hardly knew ye.
So, people may remember, but in 2003, Steam made its debut as a PC distributable platform and kind of, I don't know if you all remember this, but changed PC things for retail like forever. And by the right young timing of 2012, Japanese companies were ready to try and start on this newfangled PC market. So they launched the insanely popular, why did I write that?
People used to hate Steam, but now they love it. I'm not sure about the Epic Games Store, though.
Champions, both in the, were they actually that popular?
People liked Gladden.
And then sort of, we didn't do anything for a while.
Yeah. This is kind of the hard part of, looking back at your old photographs.
Yeah.
From 2012 to 2016, there really weren't any titles published by us on Steam.
Same thing with looking back at my past.
But by 2016, after we'd had a nap and, gotten some snacks and kind of got over ourselves, we decided to hop back in and get back to work and approach this platform one more time. And we launched Disgaea 1 in February of 2016, and from there we've kicked off a pretty steady stream of releasing titles on the Steam platform. For the next 3 years, we had titles that ranged from kind of indie-style titles like Firefly Diary, Yomawari, and then licensed anime titles like Psycho-Pass Mandatory Happiness, as well as kind of our more traditional fare from things like Disgaea 5, Labyrinth of Refrain, Covenant of Dusk. In the middle, we also managed to sneak a game in on early access called Assault Spy, and then we also revived some older titles as well, working with other places. So that's how we got stuff like Killer 7, as well as The Silver Case of 25th Ward. And now, after all that, Steam has become kind of a prime candidate for a lot of our titles, and our library has grown substantially, and we do not plan on slowing down at all.
Speaking of, our Steam Publisher sale is live now, and yesterday we actually launched...
Ys VIII is 75% off, dude.
Live HD remaster for PC. Our library has now grown so much that we can celebrate with a full Steam Publisher sale. And a lot of our ports that we're looking at on there and talking about today are actually at our lowest price in a while. We'll be running it until Monday, January 20th, so no hurry, but it's only just for a little bit.
One of the things you'll hear about in the industry is that if you don't ship a game when it's good, you don't ship a game when it's good, rather, but you ship it when it's good enough. And basically, besides independent projects and hobbyist titles, this means that everything has a budget, again, and a timeline, and it's a race against time, essentially, to get as far and as in-depth as you can and aim for a release date. And once you get around to it, you're going to ship it, and it passes certification, and sometimes that turns into good enough.
Thankfully, we don't live in such dark times anymore. Personal disclaimer, no one likes patches. Not the devs, not us, certainly not fans.
Windows 10 is so buggy. I mean, on Tuesday, Microsoft just ended Windows 7 support, so...
They would just be where they are on launch forever.
Right, and that's kind of the reality of a lot of these things where, they say, well, we had to wait and put it in a day one patch, and a lot of times it would have, not because, obviously, it's impossible to make a complete game, but just because the schedule only, allows for a hard date, and that date is not going to move.
Yeah, especially with Cyberpunk 2077 and Final Fantasy VII Remake being delayed.
But I think a place where it really shines is actually PC ports, and ours in particular, because we have to account for a lot more than just setting up a system. And a lot of times, as we're setting things up, little errors creep in here and there, and post-release patches allow us, as well as smaller publishers, an opportunity to go in one more time and just really polish the edges and make sure that it's a great experience for the players.
Something I learned really early on working in QA in the industry was basically that, and I was working on teams with like 300 plus people, and basically it didn't matter how many testers you had, it didn't matter how much dev staff you had. The fact that when you have 300 people testing a game means nothing when 6 million people are going to start playing it. Stuff will come up, stuff that you had no idea, that there was no way that you could have possibly imagined otherwise. Simply, it's a numbers game at the end of the day. And so, yeah, post-release patches are an absolute godsend. They allow us to fix things that we could have never otherwise found.
Very, very true.
So, post-release patches. It's not unusual for a title to receive post-launch support, but it's a little weirder when you count 13 years between releases.
And one of the kind of cool things about Steam, for example, is that the format allows you to kind of look at things as a work in progress in a way. And what that means is that once a game is released, we can take fan feedback into account and introduce new content and features. Believe it or not, sometimes, even though 99% of the people in our office are all gamers ourselves, there's some things that we don't necessarily think of. And when a game goes out into the world, fans have an opportunity to play, and they can tell us, what would be really cool if you did, X, Y, or Z, and we can. So what used to be unthinkable when I was growing up, for example, a game comes out and there it is, and that's how it will remain. Now it's achievable thanks to modern platforms.
My favorite one of ours from recent times was Grasshopper Manufacturer's Killer 7. Let me drop some truth bombs on you. Killer 7 is still an amazing game. It did not have English subtitles in the original GameCube release, but due to fan demand and our brilliant devs, we were able to patch them in, and for the first time, it had the entire game was subtitled in English. In some cases, the ability to revisit an older title increase awareness of the titles through accessibility alone. We were hearing from people who had issues with hard of hearing and things like that, and they were really appreciative that they could finally give the game a chance because they could understand all the dialogue that was happening in the game. This is a huge win-win. Another side benefit to the strange relationship and independence in determining a release date is that we can sometimes make requests that would normally be impossible under the conditions of the team working on the game. We haven't been super forward about it, but a lot of our most recent demos were 100% new to the title. So, like Trails of Cold Steel 3, Labyrinth of Fame, Skyfall Complete, these did not exist as demos in Japan, and we were able to pressure our development staff and get them to agree to creating demos for it because we thought that would be an excellent way to get people involved in the title.
Please, please, please don't consider what we just said kind of in defense of patches. Just consider it, patches can be used for good things as well that were originally never even within the scope of the original plan for the game, but thanks to what patches can allows us to actually add new things in.
Speaking of cool patches, or not cool patches, sorry, cool demos, Langrisser 1 and 2, that demo is coming out for all platforms. It'll be, we don't have a final date yet, but we'll be announcing it soon. It contains 6 chapters across both games, so I think it's chapters 1, 2, and 3 from Langrisser 1, and then chapters 4, 5, 6 from Langrisser 2.
Yeah, and if you play that and you have save data from it, your save data will not carry over into the main game, but having save data from the demo will unlock a couple cool things within the game itself, so definitely give the demo a try.
So, some lessons we've learned along the way. These are really simple, and sometimes a little hard, but it makes our end product better, which is why we appreciate them. Don't shy away from bad reviews, learn from them. We take what we get and we apply it towards future projects, and also, going towards patching projects. We see something and we didn't see the issues with it, but initially grasp it and realize, okay, we got to fix this. If we're in it, Steam, we're in it for the long haul. If we're committed to it, we have to be committed to it for a long time. It's not something that you can dive in and out of when it best suits you. And finally, stick by the game, stick by the fans. They are the ones who will redeem you. Nothing you can do will make a difference until the fans recognize it and say it as such.
And the fact that we might release a port of a game a bit later than the original release necessitates a lot of need to make the newer versions a little bit more enticing. Something these sometimes these ideas originate from our office, and sometimes the developers themselves actually come up with them and implement them for us. And we can agree on all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it'll be a quality of life issue, like adding the high-speed mode in Trails of Cold Steel 3, which was not in the original Japanese release, for example. And sometimes it can be something like offering it as at a competitive price point upon entry, like a lot of our PC ports for Disgaea. Sometimes it can be bundling it with an asserted amount of DLC for free, like we saw with the Ys VIII re-release. And sometimes it can just be offering a cool pre-order bonuses simply in every copy by default, like classic mode for Langrisser 1 and 2, which was kind of pay-gated in the original Japanese release.
Hey, did somebody say absurd amounts of DLC? Trails of Cold Steel 3 DLC coming to Nintendo Switch. Basically, every copy of Trails 3 for Nintendo Switch will have 26 pieces of cosmetic DLC included. It'll be in our trailer that'll be up on YouTube right after this panel. It's going to be available to everybody who buys the Switch version.
Yeah, I had to switch over to stream very quickly.
On digital or physical. No downloads necessary. It's very popular with the Ys VIII one, and we've gone ahead and done the same here. So, what kind of stuff do we have kind of going on right now? Obviously, we've been talking about a lot about Langrisser 1 and 2. Coming to PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch like it was in the original Japanese version, but this is also coming to PC, and that's completely new. That's going to be dropping March 10th. And then Disaster Report 4, a lot of people out there really loving that. It was originally just released in PlayStation 4 in Japan, and the Switch and Steam versions are new for that game as well, April 7th. So I think that just wraps about our presentation. I just want to thank...
Forgetting about something.
Yeah.
Oh, Peter, wait. Well, what are you doing here?
I heard you had some issues with the original PC release of Ys VIII.
Well, okay, it certainly had a
Yeah.
rocky start, and there is definitely some things that if we could have gone back, we would have done.
But isn't it a great thing that you reached out to me then? Hello everyone. My name is Peter Thoman, but you may know me online as Durante. I'm a founding member of PH3, specializing in high-quality ports and optimization. And I'm a huge fan of the Ys franchise.
But we've already ported Ys VIII to PC. Isn't it a little late now to be talking about like an update?
I think it's never too late to improve the PC version of a great game. And just imagine all the things we could do.
All right, you've convinced me. Let's hear some more about this update.
So here's a preview of some of the features that are coming to Ys VIII on PC. One of the first things we wanted to tackle was anti-aliasing. The original game only has a rather ineffective screen space solution. Here you can see the new screen space AA we implemented. Performance is the same, but the quality is much better. The game now also supports super sampling for higher-end systems with really great quality.
I will be redoing my Ys VIII gameplay.
I'm just getting started. The original release supported up to 144 frames per second, but something might have felt a bit off about it. Watch Adol's movement here. There was an issue with how animation progress is calculated at high frame rates. The new version runs and animates smoothly at up to 200 frames per second. It's somewhat subtle, but it affects every animation in the game, and I think here you can see the impact of this change more easily.
Shake it, Adol.
Shadowing was another area that we wanted to improve. As you can see, the original filtering of the shadows had some quality issues. In the new version, there are now 3 separate options for shadows: shadow casters, filtering, and resolution. The options you see right now correspond to the original settings, but they perform and look better. For a small additional performance impact, you can get enhanced shadow filtering with a significantly improved visual result. If you want to go even higher end, you can select Ultra Shadow Resolution for extremely stable shadows. And there's also a soft shadow option which gives you great smooth shadow results. Finally, we've also added an Ultra Shadow Casters option, which gives shadows to objects that didn't have any shadows in the original release.
Wow, that's a lot of improvements.
Another area we improved is post-processing effects. This manifests in a lot of places, and all such effects now scale correctly with the active rendering resolution and look great at any target resolution. We also worked on stability improvements and bug fixes. As one of many examples, just watch what happens to memory consumption as I open and close the map in the old and new builds. As part of these stability improvements, the game is now a 64-bit executable, which also gives us headroom to add a high-quality texture pack. This optional tech is AI generated, so the improvement is quite subtle, especially at 1080p, but it's a good option for high-end systems running the game at high resolutions.
So that's actually a whole lot of improvement.
Wait, there's still a few more things to cover.
Oh, right, sorry.
You can now fully rebind your keyboard movement, and there's also a walking key binding, which wasn't possible with the mouse keyboard controls before. Mouse camera controls are now directly one-to-one mapped rather than using joystick emulation, and this gives you a much more natural and responsive mouse look. A great graphical option I personally really like that we added is HBAO+. As you can see when you compare it to the game's original ambient occlusion, this provides a lot more depth and plasticity to the scene. For example, look around the barrel in the center or at the shelf on the right in this scene. Last, but certainly not least, we added a draw distance option to the game. In the previous release, grass and enemies pop at some distance from the camera. This is now the normal setting, but it goes up to Ultra, which eliminates pop-in on higher-end hardware. There are a few more things, but I'll wrap it up here. Why don't you tell them when they'll be able to play it?
Oh, well, I didn't think we'd be ready to reveal it.
How about we give the people what they want?
Okay, so you can dive into the updated version of Ys VIII on PC today, right now even, and it's currently on sale for 50% during our Steam Publisher sale.
But aren't you still forgetting something? A highly requested port?
Oh, but we already announced Trails of Cold Steel 3 for the Switch.
I'm talking about Trails of Cold Steel 3 coming to Steam and GOG on the 23rd of March with all the features and with other ports in the series. If you have any more questions, then drop by my
I'm gonna pre-order this. Yay!
Thank you.
Okay, a big round of applause for Peter, everybody.
Yay! It's confirmed, dude.
So yeah,
Yeah, we are incredibly excited to announce Trails of Cold Steel 3 and that it will be coming to Steam and GOG. We'll have the same DLC at the Switch launch available for a limited time, around and shortly after launch. The Steam page is actually now live, so you can wishlist the title to be reminded about when the pre-sale goes live and when we post updates about the additional improvements coming to the game on PC.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but that was not live video, just mirrors and Hollywood trickery, just something I like to call being bad at acting. Big thanks to Peter for being a sport and putting up with weird ideas.
So we just wanted to throw these back on the screen for those that maybe couldn't see it during the video when the title was in motion. But there are numerous optimizations that Peter covered, and we'll actually have a much more exhaustive list on the Steam community page, so you can get those hardcore details about what exactly has been optimized and enhanced.
Oh, and there's like one really small other thing that we've also added to the game, just like a tiny detail. Fun fact, we've been polling our fan base to get an idea of what people think we're going to be announced during this panel. And I just want to say I'm like 99% certain that no one even got close to this. Ys VIII on PC now supports experimental local co-op.
Wow, this is...
It doesn't work on all parts of the game, namely the start of the game when you're just playing as Adel. But you can now assign a second device to control two characters at once. So if you want to see all the details, like how to get started and what it looks like running on the game right now, I'd recommend checking out our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/NIS America, after this panel, because we have our friends at the Santa Ana office streaming live as soon as we wrap up here.
And this is where we'd like to give a huge thanks to the team at PH3 and at Falcom for making this happen. It was super wild. We didn't know if they'd be able to get all parties to sign on. When I sent the initial email to Falcom, I thought, they were going to say no. They were like, absolutely, go ahead. And that was awesome.
Shoot.
Oh!
Lost that.
And we're back. But yeah, it was a lot of hard work to get this up and running. But updating Ys VIII is something that we've had our eye on for a very long time.
Oh, wow.
Our release of Ys VIII had kind of a checkered history, and I was kind of there at ground zero when it all went down. So
Yeah.
I think, somebody, maybe it was myself, said a few years ago, we are committed to giving this game what it deserves. And I'd like to think that we did what we could, and we did it on the original release, and now we can do it on the PC release as well. So we're incredibly gratified to be able to bring this to you and to again give this game what it deserves.
And we thank everybody for their patience in the matter. It's been really rough seeing a lot of the comments and knowing that we're trying to make this happen. We're trying to figure out how to make this work. We know we want to do right by the game. We want to do right by the fans. We want to do right by Falcom. And it's just sort of amazing how things kind of came together at the last minute, and we were able to get it done. Again, yeah, available today. So, work, based on this being a year since I showed up at PAX South to deliver the news about Talks 3 in the first place, we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary, starting our Discord, and we're continuously putting up cool details about our LEs and answering questions directly from staff. I'm on there almost all the time. Even the most mundane ones, we got a bunch of our staff on there: localization staff, marketing staff, multimedia staff.
And it's a good time to mention too that we're a very small company, so we see anything and everything that goes on.
People just post whatever and think we're not seeing it. We see it. Yeah, we're a little hurt by it, but we understand.
Maybe some of you also don't know that there's a publisher page on Steam, and if you want to check out all of our titles, including upcoming titles as well as just kind of news in general, you'll definitely want to check that out.
I think it's one of the things that Steam doesn't emphasize too much, but yeah, there's publisher pages, and it's the easiest way to see everything that we're outputting. We also stream to Twitch twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Pacific. We will play old games, new games, upcoming demos. We've had special guests like our NIS president, Mr. Nikawa, Falcom president, Mr. Kondo, and we've got a lot of our own publishing staff, and we have more streams planned for that staff, so please check it out on the calendar on page. If any of the streams I mentioned about sound really cool, you can check them out on our archive on NIS America and NIS America Live on YouTube.
And on the note of contacting us and things like that and getting in contact with us, we'd love to hear your feedback, whether it is good or bad. And I actually can't emphasize the bad part.
Yeah, it's almost entirely, even the worst stuff is almost entirely instructive and does decide a lot of how we decide to spend our very limited time in trying to determine where we need to improve.
Yeah. The only thing that we ask is that you remember that we are human beings, that there's people behind the screen on the other side. So if you please just be as respectful as you can and remember that we do want to make these games great and we do want to give you guys an awesome experience. Hit us up anytime.
So there's one other small thing that came up during that Durante video. I'm not sure if everybody caught it. Durante is actually doing an Ask Me Anything right now. You can check it out at reddit.com/ourgames. It should be the top sticky note. He'll be answering all your questions about Ys VIII or Trails of Cold Steel 3 or, ask about the Soul stuff, among his other famous projects. As much as we've been joked about not knowing anything technical about the process, there are probably very few who are as knowledgeable as Peter. And you can ask him all the questions. We just have no idea how to answer. We really do appreciate his work on both, him and his team on both Ys VIII and Talks 3.
So for real this time, thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of joking there, but for real, let us know what you want to see it on. We gotta know. It's one of those things where a lot of times you would not believe how much of the day-to-day is spent sort of guessing and counting tea leaves and being like, what do they want it on? We're judging attitudes and environments, but we really do need feedback to make that really clear and clear to our bosses.
Yep. So thank you so much again for your time. Thanks for being here for us, and we hope we can continue to be here for you. And hit us up sometimes.
Yeah, and did they already get the pens? So if we didn't get the pens, there are pens available. They're the Class 7 badges. I don't know if you guys were handed them out.
You got them already? Cool. Everybody watching online, sorry.
Sorry. I would if I could.
Oh, come on.
But yeah, again, thank you. Please have a great rest of your PAX South.
Okay. Hold on. Right now, I'm just going to go to NIS America's YouTube channel. Hold on. Just wait a little bit. I'm just looking for the live stream right now. Unfortunately, Cold Steel 4 wasn't announced. What a bummer. Yeah, this looks like a really real possibility, this earthquake. It's a really real possibility because everybody's been predicting it for several years.
This is kind of fun. All right, let's go.
こちらビトを漁る。もうじきサーバールームに着くぞ。
We're going to that.
My turn now.
Saving the prince, huh? Not bad at all. The whining of a sore loser. It's music to my ears. You demons are evil, dude. We challenge you to a game of baseball, dude.
It's already 4:30. The stream should. Oh wait, it's 4:35. So.
Oh, whoops, sorry.
Okay.
I'm way far out. Oh man, I forgot the camera's over there. Sorry guys, we switched everything up. Welcome guys. We are doing our post-PAX thing. I'm gonna fix that green screen back there in a second.
I'm blocking it with my body, so.
This is going to be our Ys VIII Lacrimosa of Dana co-op experimental play, so this is your first chance to see it in action. Sorry, I'm gonna have to like lean into you for a little bit. Just to go over a couple of announcements, since you guys are probably watching the PAX South panel. Quick cover of everything that happened. Ys VIII is getting an update. There's a bunch of patches happening. Durante is helping us out with that, luckily. Currently, there is also an AMA going on with Durante, so we might not be able to get to all of your questions. I think Durante will probably have better answers anyways. That's currently, I believe, on Reddit R Games right now, so if you do have questions, please feel free to go there and ask them. He should be able to answer a good amount of them.
Yeah.
Also,
super nice. So,
yes.
Yeah.
We do have a community page that just went up. I believe if you type !Ys VIII, that should bring it up. Just like if you type ! Durante, that'll bring up the Reddit thingy in general.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a quick recap for you guys. We did announce the Little Town Hero limited edition. I believe they said it was coming out in spring 2020. So look forward to that. Our store page should be up now. We also have the Languisher demo for all platforms coming. No release date on that yet. However, look forward to that. It will contain 6 chapters. I believe it's 1, 2, 3 from the first Languisher, and then 4, 5, 6 for the second one. So you get a good amount of game. We were playing through 4, 5, and 6, and it actually took a decent amount of time to get through that. And last but not least, we did announce Trails of Cold Steel 3 coming to PC. That's going to be released on March 23rd on Steam and GOG. So hopefully you guys like that. It's another place you can buy the game on.
No, I mean, what's Cold Steel? What is that?
Oh god.
Okay.
Anyways, we're just gonna get straight into Ys. I'm gonna slide off screen. Oh, I should probably let you introduce yourself. This is someone new that we don't usually have on stream.
Who are you?
Hi, I'm Rebecca, and I'm part of the web team here at NIS America.
Yeah, if you see a fancy website, she probably did it.
So she's gonna be playing co-op with Sahil here. And let's get into it. I'm gonna slide off and fix that green screen.
Okay. Should we reposition ourselves? I think Laura's gonna fix up the green
Yeah,
screen.
my bad. We had a lot of last minute things going on.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Okay, I got this.
Alright. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Alright. Alright, everyone. So, just in case you don't know what this game is, this is Ys VIII. It's a fantastic game, also developed by PAX. And it's like one of my favorite RPGs ever made.
Same.
Good thing is that, you don't need to know anything about the other Ys games to play this one, so you can just kind of buy it and go straight into it without having a whole lore exposition, I guess. But yeah, it's a really fantastic game. So, can you click on the game, Laura? So I can actually play?
Sorry.
Oh, thank you. All right, so
It's too late to start complaining. Now keep moving.
You're becoming a real spitfire, little lady.
So, I see that. Yeah, we're playing co-op. It's kind of crazy to think about. What the heck? Yeah, by the way, it's still a little
Yeah.
we're still working on it, but we just wanted to go off what we had. Also, the game's frozen again.
I'm sorry, I was lowering the audio. Guys, let me know if the audio is still too loud. I'm trying to lower it. I didn't realize it was going to be set so loud.
Yeah. Okay, are we good? Okay, cool. Alright. Oh wait, if you move the mouse, then the game also moves too.
Give me a check.
Okay.
There. Go play.
No, you need to click it again.
What did you do?
Okay, we're good. Alright. So don't move the mouse, please. It's on stream if I'm not yelling at Laura.
Sorry, I'm sick.
Where are we headed?
Sorry, they said it was too quiet.
Okay, you know.
Okay, you moved
Hey
on.
everyone, we're off to a great start already.
Sorry guys. It's a weird thing with Steam where it actually interrupts our streaming. Or if I click anything, it interrupts Sahil's playing, so it's a dual mouse thing we're trying to do.
Okay, so what were they talking about again? I don't even know. Hi everyone, how are you doing? Let's start over. We're playing Ys VIII. It's a fantastic game. Everyone should go play it. It's 50% off right now or something, right? That is a great price for the game. Basically this game used to be a single player game, but now you can play multiplayer, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so we're like stuck on an island, and I'm kind of skipped. This is actually my personal save file because we use the data, so I just got all the save data. I played the game. And yeah, we're gonna head towards Mount I think it was called. And yeah, we're just gonna kind of show off the multiplayer here. It's pretty cool because Rebecca is controlling Adel, and I'm controlling Alaxia.
Right now I'm installing the Ys VIII PC port again. Or actually the update.
Rebecca kind of has some limited controls, like she can't actually like switch characters. I'm the one who controls that, so if I press
It's a 3 gigabyte update, so
I'm playing Neil or Sahaj, Alaxia, so yeah, you know you're right now. Again, sorry, it is a little disorienting at first, but get used to it. And Rebecca can control the camera, but I'm gonna kind of control the camera for us, just so like we don't get really dizzy or whatever. But yeah, we're just kind of running through this area. Some of these enemies are really easy, just because we've already been through this area. I'm just taking all the credit, Rebecca. But yeah, as you can see, I kind of upped the settings a little bit, so the game looks a little bit more, like the render distance is a little higher and stuff, which is pretty cool. And yeah, there's like, I can actually show off the options anyway, but so I pick out a system, go to options. Yeah, we added HBO and all this stuff, which is pretty cool. We add some more shadow stuff, which is all really nice. And yeah, you can like take a look at it. This is available right now, I think, right?
Yes, this is also experimental, just so you guys know. Work in progress. Also, just to quickly call out, someone on YouTube had asked, because Durante's PC only, is the Switch invited to the party? This is a currently PC only.
Yeah, it's a
feature.
PC only thing.
yeah.
So right now,
Well, there's one thing I have to tell you about. Okay. So, what did we learn this stream? Ys VIII's PC port has got a big update. 3.5 gigs? Or was it 3.8? It was 3.5 gigs. And it's available today. You could also buy it 50% off. Also, Trails Cold Steel 3 is getting a PC port, which will be out on March 23rd. But no Cold Steel 4, unfortunately. Anyways, I better find myself some time to play Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, so thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.